Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our FAB Leadership Webinar. My name is Nick, I'm one of the founders of Coteam, and it's my pleasure to spend the next 45 minutes with you discussing some pretty exciting things. Before we jump into anything though, one of the most important things we feel at Coteam is just taking a moment to become really present, just taking a second out of our day to actually just focus on where we are. Inevitably, you're probably running around at the moment. You might be trying to wolf your lunch down, trying to multitask with different things. We're going to do a very quick breathing exercise just to make sure that we really are present and calm and focused on what we're going to be doing in the next 45 minutes. It's very straightforward. We're going to spend just 1 minute together breathing. And this might feel a little awkward for you at first because we are going to be silent for a minute. But all I want you to do is just just sit calmly wherever you are, hands in your lap, and just breathe in and out. And the most important thing here is I want you to count the number of breath cycles you take within the 1 minute period. I'm going to ask you how many you took at the end, and we'll have a little bit of a chat about why the breath is so important. So whenever you're ready, I would invite you now to just start breathing in and breathing out. Count your breath cycles. And there we go. That's 1 minute gone. Let me ask a quick question. How many breath cycles did you actually take? Probably a strange thing to think about coming into this webinar. I thought, bam, we're going to be straight into this high-performing team stuff. But instead, we've asked you to do this. So how many breath cycles did you actually take just now? I've opened up a little bit of a poll there. Be really honest. 3 to 5, a couple of you there. Lots in that 6 to 8 period, which is fantastic. That is the sort of optimal number of breaths to be taking in a minute cycle. I can see quite a few of you getting up above 9 there though. And obviously breathing is one of those things that's very, very important for us to focus on, to just really center ourselves and to bring that sense of calm. So I know it was a slightly odd way to start the webinar, but hopefully we're going into things now with a slightly calmer, more open mind. We've got a bit to get through today. 2 key things we're really going to talk about. We want to talk about sort of what makes high-performing teams. And we've invited along a very special guest to help us dissect that. But then we're also going to talk a little bit around, as a leader, how do you actually lead teams for high performance? And we've got some free tools that we're going to be giving away to really help you engage with that. But without further ado, I would like to welcome our very special guest, Sam Dickinson from Google. Sam, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Nick. Hi everyone. I've just realized I'm wearing the same t-shirt in the photograph that's there, but I have a different haircut. This haircut was taken back in pre-COVID days. Do you remember when we actually cared what our hair looked like? I'm now the proud owner of some Amazon Basics hair clippers, which my hair cutting now is an activity for our 5- and 3-year-old to keep them busy. How the world has changed in so many ways. Folks, lovely to be here with you today. I'm absolutely obsessed with what it really takes to transform organizations, and have been for more than 20 years now. Formerly, I worked at What If, and I can see Tanya Badges on the call, old friend from What If. Hi, Tanya. And I've been at Google since, for almost 10 years now, working on same challenges around transformation, but with a digital twist. And I've become a massive advocate during that time of what I call people-led digital transformation. So, the idea that, yes, technology is important, but if you're exclusively thinking about technology, it tends not to go very well. So my focus is on the people piece, both customers of Google and also employees internally, and understanding those, the motivations, what the purpose of technology is, and often just wrapping quite an elegant layer around it. we are at the same time very data-driven business. Won't come as any surprise to you around that, and we invest just as much time and energy into a data-driven approach on the commercial side of the business as we do on the engineering side. So today I'm going to share a few principles of this approach that we have, which leans on data to understand a bit more about high-performing teams and leadership of those teams. So question, what makes for a high-performing team? Well, one of the examples of this data-driven approach that I talked about earlier on came from our people analytics team, which numbers actually now many hundreds of people globally who obsess about this, this stuff in quite minute detail. What is it that really makes a big difference? And a few years back, we did a project called Project Aristotle, and this was all about codifying, working out what, both on the engineering side and the commercial sides of the business, what is it that makes some teams perform better than others. So in this project, we had 4 success metrics. It involved 180 teams from all across the world. We had 250 different inputs into it. We conducted 200 plus interviews, and we ran a whole load of models around this to really make sure that what we were getting to was rigorous in terms of those insights. So what did we end up finding? Well, what we found there was a whole load of things that mattered, and there were some things that really didn't matter. And actually, there were a load of surprises to us about what mattered and what didn't matter. And we're going to do a little Menti now to hear from you folks and see what your perspectives are on which did we find to be the top 5 most important factors for high-performing teams at Google. Now, you can get involved in this Menti either by scanning the QR code on your phone. Nick is also putting into the chat box a link for it, and I believe, Nick, also the link is in the email as well. So 3 ways that you can access that. So your challenge is to just pick 5 of those things, the 5 things that we found at Google really mattered when it came to high-performing teams. I know you folks will be thinking, mulling this over, and working it out. So we're going to give it 30 seconds just to watch those results come in. Interesting mix there. Curious to see them going up and down. Well, not down, but up. Let's give it 10 more seconds for people to maybe pick out their 4th or 5th. Okay. Right, so we've got a really interesting spread there. Top scorers were psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, impacts in there, work that is personally important, team size, and not a lot of not many people thought tenure was important, seniority, or the extroversion of the teammates, or co-location, interestingly. All right, so bit of a spread there. Let's reveal the results, Nick. So these were the 5 things that were regarded as that we found to be the most important things when it came to high-performing teams at Google. So got impact, meaning, structure and clarity, dependability, and psychological safety. It was interesting to see that people did pick those out. One little twist on this is that the order that I've put them in there, all of those 5 things are important, but they are in reverse order of importance. We found that psychological safety was the single most important thing when it comes to the effectiveness of teams at Google. Psychological safety is difficult to say. It's also can be defined in different ways. But the way that we're talking about psychological safety is that people, firstly, are free to to show up at work in a respectful way, but without any fear of negative judgment for who they are as individuals. Thing one. Thing two, just as importantly, that people are feel that it is safe for them to take risks, not just personal risks, but also professional risks with more creative, less maybe solutions that may be less likely to be successful. Safe in the knowledge that they will not be negatively judged for experimenting, for trying new things out. Okay, so that's psychological safety. Dependability of teammates, incredibly important. Knowing that the people around you not only have got your back, but when you say that you're going to do something, that you deliver on that. Structure and clarity, both in a top-down sense, but also when it comes to people defining what their objectives and the key results are for the quarter and the year ahead, really important. Final two, one is sort of at one end and one is at the other. So meaning is quite closely linked, I think, to purpose. Do people find value in the role that they are doing? It's quite easy, I think, with the, in inverted commas, sexy projects, where Google X might be a good example, where people often, meaning might be very easy to connect with. But our view is that meaning can be derived from any roles within the business if it is framed and thought about carefully enough. And the same thing at the other end of the scale of things around impact. What is the value of the work and the benefit both to the business and to our customers and the world at large. So those 5 things we found to be the most important. Here were some things that we found were not important from that group. So co-location, we have found for many, this was done pre-COVID, this particular study, though it's updated regularly, but we have found for 5 years that co-location has not been significant in determining the performance of teams. Workload size wasn't a factor, though it did impact on some other areas. Seniority of the team members, extroversion, not significant. Individual performance didn't necessarily mean that teams were high performing. Team size, not a factor, though the caveat on that is that teams are broken down from what might be a huge team into smaller project groups, but the size of the absolute team not significant, nor was tenure of people who were in that team. Next one, please, Nick. So when it comes to psychological safety, this can sometimes be seen as as a little bit woolly, as a bit of a sort of nice to have, maybe a buzzword. But what we have found when it comes to psychological safety, that there are really like clear business results that come from psychologically, when you have more psychologically safe teams. So this is from the ad side of the business, but we found that these numbers are broadly similar when it comes to the engineering side with successful new product launches. So psychologically safe teams do 17%, tend to do on average 17% better or overachieve against their sales targets, and psychologically unsafe teams under target by 19%. So that's a difference in total of 36%, which is pretty remarkable, a pretty remarkable difference between these psychologically safe and unsafe teams. Next one, please, Nick.
Brilliant. So I think, thank you for sharing that with us, Sam. And no huge surprises in there for many of us, but these sort of these 5 dynamics for high performing teams, very much what Google came out of that Project Aristotle. And of course, that's not going to be the same for every organization or every team. But here at Coteam, we have a little bit of a perspective on things as well. And anyone who's engaged with us before or been on one of our programs know that we've been really looking at some of those bigger macro shifts that are happening in the landscape in terms of how we sort of build and run organizations, and really transitioning a little bit from what you see on the left of the slide to what you see on the right of the slide. And one of the things that I think really underpins all the five of these dynamics, is actually the first thing you see here. It's this idea of balance. People having balance in their work, balance in their lives, being in the appropriate headspace to tackle challenges. There's been a lot around recently with, particularly in relation to the COVID pandemic, around mental health issues in the workplace. So this idea of trying to strike this idea of balance, and for us here at Coteam, that really underpins everything else. And that's what we add in sort of our sixth dynamic, the foundations of it. So when we look to, is a team effective or not, this gives us 6 quite interesting criteria to assess that team against. And there's lots of ways to do this, but we're actually really excited, and I'm going to talk about this later in the webinar, to be able to give you a free team effectiveness tool that you can take back after this webinar. There's 30 questions that you can assess the team against collaboratively that will really help you understand in a quantitative way, based off this Google research, based off what we know at Coteam, to how effective the team is actually operating. And it's a really easy to use free tool. It will take literally about an hour for your team to complete, but it can really bring out some fantastic conversations. So make sure you stick around till the end of the webinar, and we'll actually give you that tool so you can take that back into the teams and give it a go. See how you actually stack up against these things. One thing I'd say about psychological safety is it's a bit like the Holy Trinity, right? Lots of teams are searching for it. And in my experience, very few teams actually have it. So hopefully this audit that we've created will really help you ascertain not only where you're at, but also get you conversing how you can move further towards these particular factors. This, of course, leads us a little bit more into the Coteam space as well. When we look at these 6 dynamics, as a leader, how are you leading for high performance? How are you actually activating these? How are you encouraging this behavior? How are you creating a sense of balance? How are you setting a vision or meaning, or letting people feel that their work has impact, or providing the structure and clarity that they actually need? And that's really what we want to talk a little bit about now, is this leadership, this way of leading, this way of thinking. I've been working as a leadership coach myself for many, many years. And there's definitely been a seismic shift, again, accelerated in the past 18 months by the pandemic, but in the way of which we lead teams towards high performance. And we're going to start this with a very quick pop quiz. Can you tell me what year this org chart is from? Anyone want to take a stab at what year this organizational chart is from? I've popped up another poll there on the screen. I'm going to credit to Aaron Dignan, who wrote a brilliant book called Brave New Work, which I've lifted this from. But what year do you think this organizational chart is from? I'll give you a couple more seconds there to come through. Okay. Lots of you saying sort of 2010. I'll give you another few seconds. Let's have a look actually how you voted there. So lots of you saying sort of 2010, which is interesting. Quite a few saying 1980. The actual truth is this is an org chart from 1910. That's right. This is actually 110 years old, and is from a railway organization at that time. But isn't this an incredible thing to think about? You think about anything else that's evolved over the past 100 years. I mean, we have gone through incredible waves of disruption and innovation. But you look at this, and it's literally not much has changed in 110 years. This could very much be from the last decade. And I think this is an important thing to think about. Again, having been a leadership coach, having worked with lots of different teams and organizations, this idea of leadership, this hierarchical dread, like top-down command and conquer style of leadership, is really dated. And a lot of leadership models that I've worked with in my time, they're just this real sort of command and conquer approach to things. This, if you shout, people will follow. You can't tell a team, be psychologically safe. It doesn't work like that. And this sort of, leadership models are often lost in theory, and they're lost in this sort of weird management ways of working and of consulting as well. In the last few years, there's been this big drive towards this idea of what we call servant leadership. How are the leaders actually trying to lift teams as they climb up? How do you truly put the customers in the center of your org? How do you, lots of these things like agile ways of working, or thinking and behaving like a startup, or lean methodologies, are really about trying to bring this idea of servant leadership to market, and really trying to backwards propel off that. And if we go back to those dynamics that we were talking about before, impact, meaning, structure and clarity, psychological safety, balance, how as a leader do you actually start to create an environment where these will foster, and you can really drive people in the way that you want to drive them? I guess I want to check in with you, Sam. Yeah, when we talk about leadership in the Google sense, what does it actually mean?
There's a story that goes around Google from the first couple of years that Google existed as a business, and it goes that Larry Page said to Sergey Brin one day, "Why have we got managers? Like, why have we got managers? Why do we have people with leaders with a big L? Like, we don't need that. We've got smart people. Everyone knows what they're doing. Let's just get rid of them." And apparently Sergey, this is when there was a couple of dozen people at the business, maybe a few hundred, just went, yeah, okay, fine. And so that was it. Overnight, or not even overnight, in split second, they got rid of all managers and leaders, people with a big L, in the business. And that lasted for 2 weeks. 2 weeks they went without managers before they realized that actually management was really, really important. And so they gave the provocation to themselves. Well, if we have discovered that management actually is pretty important, and we need to have competent, capable leaders in the business, let's do everything that we can to create the best examples of leadership that we can. And so, surprise, surprise, they took a data-driven approach to that. And I just wanted to share a few principles about how we think about leadership of high-performing teams, small and large. So it's our belief that leaders matter, and they've got an outsized impact on Google's culture and Google's success. That they create and sustain the conditions for openness, creativity, and execution. So we believe that they're expected to bring their excellence to the leadership roles and uphold the cultural fabric that makes our business a great one to work at. And the way that is expressed is through what we call Google's leadership expectations. So these are guideposts that go across 3 areas. So one that is about driving work themselves as individuals, but 2 things that are one more about other people, and the final piece about just sort of how you show up as a respectful leader. So drive amazing work, lift your people, and lead with respect. These are the 3 leadership expectations. And then underneath that, we have got some examples, or 3 examples for each of those. And I think that might be a build, Nick. So in drive amazing work, acting as an owner, delivering the impossible, thriving in complexity, being an excellent manager, inspiring followership, building bridges, and then within lead with respect, modeling humility, act with integrity, and fostering inclusion. Now, these things, the way these were developed was partly from observation internally set by leaders themselves who thought that these things were important, but part of this data-driven approach has meant constantly checking in with these and regularly updating, sometimes tweaks in language, but sometimes bringing new pieces in. Example of how this has played out, both top down and bottom up. Those leaders who who score highly on driving amazing work are 3.5 or 3.4% more likely to be top-rated leaders by Google guys. So when they are good at this, the people who they lead agree that they are doing a fantastic job. 2.7 for lift your people, and 3.7 for those who lead with respect. So interesting that of all of the factors in there that determines how leaders are rated, top down and bottom up, those who lead with respect are that seems to have the biggest impact. Next one, I think, Nick. So that's very, quite Google focused. And I think when it comes to the high performing teams piece and the leadership piece, this is there is a sort of caveat or a bracket at the end of each of these. These are about what makes high performing teams at Google, and what do we think is important for leadership at Google. Now, we believe that there are some universal principles in there, but for every organization, it's going to be a bit different. And it's interesting that the way Nick has developed the high performing teams audit is it's flexible enough for you to add things that you think are important for your organization. So it's customizable, which I think is really smart. What I'd love to know from you folks is, for you as leaders within your organizations, what are the most important traits from your perspective around modern leadership? And same thing, we have a Menti for that, so you can scan the QR code there. The link will be in the chat. You've got the hang of this now. I haven't even finished the briefing and it's all coming in. And we'll give I never tire of seeing these things build over time. It's great. We'll give it 10 more seconds. All right. So let me just play a few of these back. So the ones that are really jumping out here that seem to have quite a lot of energy around them is emotional intelligence. This is going to be a challenge for me because as they're moving around. Trustworthiness. And then empathy and empathetic are split out, but those two are pretty much the biggest ones that are there. And I find that absolutely fascinating because this is really what we wanted to talk about for the rest of the short time that we have available today. This idea of empathetic leadership and what that really means and why that might be one of the greatest opportunities to bring about like seriously positive impact within teams as a leader. So let's move it on, Nick. A few years ago, I came across this model, which is I think a really great way of thinking about leadership. So all of those criteria that you talked about, or what I talked about with from Google, and that you talked about there. Sometimes this can, at its worst, create a bit of a sort of hot mess of different things that leaders could or should be doing, and told that they should be doing sometimes. But what's really difficult around this, I think, is making it actionable. So something that I've been working on and now working closely with Nick around is breaking down these approaches to leadership into a really simple framework that helps you understand how you can go beyond this version of leadership that was suitable for org structures that, in the antiquated examples that Nick shared earlier on. So this approach that we use is called FAB Leadership, broken down into forward styles of leadership, alongside style of leadership, and then behind style of leadership. The example that you saw there of William Wallace, Mel Gibson's character there with a sword in hand might be one way that a forward style of leadership could be demonstrated. When you are the person at the front of the room, front of a meeting, delivering, you're the one speaking, they are the people listening, and you are there to inspire them. Now, I'm certainly not saying that there is no place for this style of leadership, but to only demonstrate that, I think, is missing lots of opportunities. And I broadly split the emphasis across these three things equally. So forward, important, but not the only one. And I'm going to give you some examples in a second of what we think really counts when it comes to forward, alongside, and behind approaches. So alongside is that more collaborative style of leadership where you are working with somebody on a challenge, right? Often that might be framed in a sort of coaching style way, but I'll give you again an examples of what I think works really well from our perspective around alongside. And then behind, which is probably the most underused form of leadership. This is when you may not be saying anything at all, right? But your antennae, your figurative antennae are up, where you're not just active listening, but you are actively observing, sensing what is going on, either in a room or in your team, and what is going on. And my recommendation is always that as leaders, spending at least a third of your time in that behind mode of listening, behind mode of leading, seeking to really understand what is going on, will serve you really well. Now, this framework really is almost like a sort of a goldfish bowl for all of the different approaches that you may have around leadership. And there is no shortage of approaches for forward, alongside, and behind. But in our experience, there are a few that really stand out as things that can lead to a real trajectory uptick in performance. Two for each of them. The first one in forward is being able to create a compelling vision. So I've been lucky enough to work with Google X on a number of projects, and the ability to define and express a vision that is 10x rather than 10% can be one of the single most important starts in setting a team up for success. So we've got some thinking around that. Second thing is around telling powerful stories. So we are data driven, I'll say it again, but data in and of itself is not enough to change minds, and well, it may change minds, but it certainly won't change behavior. So one of the most powerful ways I think that you can encourage people to take action is to appeal to a different part of the brain, not the sort of neocortex, the logical part of the brain, but the ancient part of the brain, the limbic brain. And storytelling is an incredible way of doing that. When you hook into that part of the brain using character-driven stories, it brings about massive differences. So that is a second piece of that I think is really important in forward leadership. The alongside piece, I'm a big fan of Edward de Bono, who some of you may have heard of for his 6 thinking hats thing. I don't really use that very much, but a less well-known piece of his work was around a thing he called rivers of thinking. And this was all about saying that people really struggle to think differently about challenges because we are constrained by the experiences that we have had before, that essentially keep us in like a river of thinking and flowing that flows and keeps us sort of stuck in our ways of approaching challenges. And Edward de Bono's view was that 2 things can really help you to get out of rivers of thinking, and these are worth bearing in mind, I think, as a leader. One is provocation, so asking questions that could just be as simple as the question why, why are we doing this? Going back to first principles and really trying to understand. And then the other thing is stimulus, so examples that you could hold up, demonstrations that you can make to help people to think in new and different ways. One example would be looking to different places in the world where a similar challenge might have been faced, and how you can go about using stimulus from that to crack your own challenges. And I think if leaders can do that, and offer that up to their teams, that's an amazing form of leadership. And then the behind piece is really composed of two things again. This active observation that I talked about, tuning up your selective attention for what is really going on within your team, and then on the basis of those observations, giving high quality, actionable feedback, not just at the end of performance cycles, but creating a culture of feedback within your teams. Now, for each of those things, within Forward, creating compelling visions, telling powerful stories, within alongside coaching through provocation and stimulus, and then in the behind style of leadership, active observation and good quality feedback. These are things that Nick and I have brought together to create experiences that you can make the most of. And Nick, I'll pass over to you.
Brilliant. So yes, I'm super proud to have been working with Sam to develop what we call our Leading for High Performance workshop, which we've been running with clients already, and it has had tremendous impact. It's a 2 half-day workshop that really moves away from sort of theoretical leadership models, like this is what you should do, and really brings practicalities to this. And allows people to sort of, for people maybe stepping into a management role, for an existing management team that maybe just needs to update their thinking. I mean, also can be a brilliant bolt-on to other leadership training that you're running. But it's a fantastic little workshop Sam and I have been working to build, really based around this FAB model. I don't know if I like to call it a model, because I think it's much better than that. It's a much more impactful way of doing things. And if you'd like to find out more about this, we will reach out to you after this webinar, and we can absolutely share those details with you. But the moment I think you've all been waiting for, and I think one of the key things that I'd like you to take away from the session today is to actually go back into teams, thinking about those 6 dynamics, and run this activity. Like I said, it won't take long to do, but it will give you a really good idea of where the team is currently at. And hopefully will facilitate a brilliant discussion around where maybe you need to focus some of those energies on. If you are leading a team at the moment and you are curious if you've got psychological safety, this audit that we've built will really help you to do that. And it's reasonably straightforward. I'm going to share a link now into the discussion box, but we will send this around again after the workshop. It's a very simple sort of spreadsheet. Like I said, 30 questions that you get everyone in the team to answer. It will tally up results and will actually help you facilitate that debrief. It is reasonably self-explanatory, but as Sam also pointed out earlier on, it is customizable as well. We understand that not every team is exactly the same. So we wanted to give you a free tool that will work out of the box. But again, if you'd like to add some of your own statements into that, or to create some things that you really want to check in with your team about, you are able to do that as well. Like I said, we will send the link around afterwards. You might want to click on it now in the chat, but I will make sure that this is sent out as a follow-up. Go and run this with your teams. We've presented a lot of information to you today. Particularly as things start to shift, we're potentially going back into the office. We're still trying to work out exactly these new ways of working and what they mean for us. This can be a really, really useful little audit to help get everyone on the same page and to start the dialogue, if nothing else. That more or less brings us to the end of the session today. We are more or less right on time. We will hang around if there's any specific questions or anything else that you'd like us to dive into. You can use the Q&A function there in Zoom if you'd like to ask a specific question to Sam and I. If you do need to run, thank you for your attention. Hopefully this has been informative, given you a couple of ideas to take back into the teams, and hopefully something very actionable that you can do there as well with the audit tool. Any closing words from you there, Sam?
How do I find the unmute button? Common problem. No, just big thanks for coming along and spending your really valuable time with us. I hope you found some of this useful, and you're curious about how data-driven approach using this audit tool might just give you some stimulus to think in new and different ways about your creating high-performing teams within your organization, and how leadership of those teams might be done in a slightly different way.
We've got a great question here actually from Dan K, saying, should this audit be done anonymously or by team members like a 360? So I would strongly encourage that this is not done anonymously. If you feel like you're in a situation where you need to do it anonymously, there might be bigger issues at play. So the idea here is it will aggregate the data and anonymize it on the final tab of the tool, which will give you a little traffic-like ranking system that you can use, but you may want to dig deeper into some of those bits and pieces. So I would strongly encourage you to not do it anonymously, but if you feel like there is big problems in the team, then yes, in theory, it could be done that way. Hopefully that answers the question there. I completely agree with you also, Rashmi. Whilst empathy is a good trait, you also need to have clarity. Going back to this word cloud that we put up before, empathy is a big word there, but we also see clarity and vision, authenticity, structure, these types of things coming through as well. And that's where we really develop this sort of FAB model to help you think about, how empathy sits across each of those modes, forward, alongside, and behind, but also maybe some of the other traits that you can bring in to really drive on those as well. Tamika, yes, absolutely. We can share further details around that. I will follow up with you in regards to that as well. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Thank you for attending. Like Sam said, we know your time is super precious, so we do appreciate you being here with us today. And we will hopefully talk with you again soon. Thank you, Sam.
See you, folks.
Bye for now.